first off, Governor, I know that there's been some talk about how we were trying to move into phase 5. What's the update? What are you seeing? What do you want people to know?
Well, we're watching the numbers very closely. And while we have done an incredible job pushing our curve down, we've saved thousands of lives, we've made huge progress, and it's come with sacrifice, to be sure. We are concerned about a couple of spots in Michigan, and we're going to watch it very closely. Ingham County, we've got an outbreak. We know that there are some outbreaks in some facilities, agricultural, across the state. And so we're watching very closely. I've said my goal was to get the whole state to phase 5 by July 4th, but it's all going to be driven by the data. And so as we go into next week, we'll have a press conference, we'll share data and make a decision as we get a little closer. So I guess if I'm going to add anything, it's that I hope people continue to take this very seriously. We see what's happening across the country. We know that masks are the most important thing we can do individually, aside from staying home, to prevent the spread. And so everyone's got to keep their guard up.
And I know we've seen a few days where we've seen some increases where it was looking so good. Is there any trend the state is seeing as to what the cause is? I know we've had some restaurants. Is it that we're loosening just because, and as we loosen, more people interact?
So I think that it's probably a mixture of things. You know, I've chatted with our epidemiologists and our public health experts. We know that the more people move around, the more likely it is that spread can occur. That's why the stay-home order was so important in those early days. And people are thinking, we've been doing this for a while, and they're tired of it. I'm tired of it. But the fact of the matter is, we've got to have a cultural change until we have a vaccine. Wearing masks and washing our hands and practicing social distancing is going to be critical to all of our ability to keep engaging our economy. And so it's really important that people keep doing that.
All right, you're talking about that, and I am seeing online that people are planning to go to Jobby Nooner, tens of thousands of people having a big old party. What's your message to folks, and what's your message to local authorities as to how they should handle this sort of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, what we're seeing happen in Texas and Arizona and Florida and the Carolinas, you know, they are seeing exponential growth. It's out of control. And we're looking at states that are precluding people from those states from traveling into them. And that's something we might have to talk about at some point. We know that COVID-19 was brought into Traverse City from out of state, same with Midland. The fact of the matter is, COVID-19 is still here. And so dropping our guard now means that we will very likely increase spread in Michigan. And where we have community spread, we may have to take steps backward in terms of going back into phase 3 or phase 2. And I can tell you this, I don't want to do that. And I know that no one wants to. And that's why it's so important that as people are thinking about gathering, whether it's 25 people or it's 200 people, wear your mask, be smart, and practice the social distancing that we know works. Because if we have community spread, it will mean we all have to make sacrifice again, and that's the last thing any of us wants.
We're also working on a story today just about some confusion amongst banquet owners. They don't know whether they're qualified as a restaurant or a place for a gathering. They don't know how many people they're allowed. Is there any clarification available on that?
I think there's a lot of clarity in the FAQs around all of our executive orders. And so we have written them so that people who own banquet halls can understand, you know, they're not a regular restaurant operation. It is where special events take place. The fact that they're inside in halls makes them inherently a little more risky than if it was a gathering outside. And so we do have, we have articulated what the best practices are and what is permitted and what's not. And so going to look at the executive order is one way, looking at the FAQs is a more clarity too, I think.
I think maybe the question they're asking then is, should they be able to say that they're a restaurant having all these people and be at 50% capacity, or are they limited to the numbers for gatherings?
Well, there's a cap on gatherings, and so that is really what is applicable. But, you know, I think that there's more clarity in those FAQs, as I mentioned. You know, what I know is that people don't want to play fast and loose here. We've got to really take this seriously. And all of these owners who I know are eager to get back into serving and doing their business want to make sure they do it right. And so I encourage people to make sure they they're familiar with the protocols and that they do everything they can to keep their workforce and their patrons safe.
The other thing that we've been covering lately is a call to not require standardized tests, or at least all the standardized tests. What are your thoughts on that and your message to the U.S. Department of Education?
So one of the things that we thought was really important to do was to convene some of our best minds in education to promulgate kind of what a return to learn plan looks like for the fall, so that we're safe when we re-engage, but also so that we can resume some in-person instruction and give our kids the education that they need. And I've had a lot of thoughts on the standardized testing in this state for a long time. I recognize that right now is an important moment for us to get this right. And we don't want our kids to pay a price for COVID-19 and a global pandemic. And so when it comes to standardized testing, generally, I think we should always be skeptical of a measurement that occurs on one day, could be a good day or a bad day for a child, when they have a year's worth of learning that contributes to whether or not they're getting the kind of educational support that they need. And so I think as we move forward, we've got to be very mindful of all the unique challenges because of the pandemic.
What's your reaction to the Republicans in the legislature's plan for funding schools that they've been talking about this week?
Well, they don't really have a plan to fund schools, unfortunately. I think that they put out a one-pager that was very similar to what the DeVos organization GLEP put out. I think it's, to talk about prioritizing education, it means we would be on the same page. But with regard to how we get it done, I think is where there's so much more work to do. We need flexibility from the federal government in order to use these CARES Act dollars to meet the needs of our children. And of course, to support the front line who's been there exposing themselves to health risk to take care of the rest of us. So that's, I think, the primary push for all of us should be to get the United States Senator and Mitch McConnell to get this HEROES Act to the president's desk and to get him to sign it.
With Republican lawmakers in Lansing writing say that we don't need it because we were fiscally responsible and they don't want to pay for other states out of federal tax dollars, what are they doing to Michigan, in your opinion?
Well, we have a $3 billion problem in the current year, a $4 billion problem in the next fiscal year. Anyone who pays attention to the budget probably knows that the general fund part of the budget is what we have discretion over. Everything else is already determined how it gets spent. That general fund piece has not changed in 20 years. And so we've been underinvesting in our kids' education, in our infrastructure, which we know every single day as we drive down the roads or we see what happened with a dam in Michigan. We know that these fundamentals are absolutely essential. And so the fact that we haven't been able to do more investment in 20 years tells you how tight this budget is, and to have a $3 billion problem in that small amount that hasn't changed is devastating potentially. That funds our schools, that funds our public health, that funds our public safety, and that's precisely why we need the Republicans in Washington, D.C. to help us get this done.
We've got about 1 more minute.
The Republicans in the state legislature, they're accusing you of ordering nursing homes to take COVID-19 patients. Did you order them to take patients?
No, and that, I think it was interesting. One of the primary people in the Senate on the Republican side acknowledged that is specific fact. They haven't found a single instance where a nursing home was ordered. What we worked with was what we had in terms of best information at the beginning of this crisis, when we had exponential growth and people, we were maxed out in our hospitals. We didn't have enough PPE. We were moving so fast. We followed the CDC guidance, which was to permit nursing homes to allow residents to come back after they were hospitalized, so long as they had a separate unit that was separately staffed and they followed all these protocols. That was the CDC guidelines, and that's what we followed. We never required a single nursing home to take in a patient that was recovering from COVID-19. It's just plain false.
And just one more question. What specifically would you do if President Trump announced he's coming to Michigan for a rally?
I've got my team looking into that. First and foremost, I recognize we're in an election year, and I recognize that there are going to be opportunities and interest for people to see candidates. What I want to do is keep people safe, whether they are out to see President Trump or they're out to see Vice President Biden, who's running for president, or anyone else who's on the ballot this year. I just want people to be safe. And so what we saw in Arizona last night, people literally sitting next to each other, none wearing masks, all inside, and a lot of yelling, that is prime condition for a super spreader event. And that is what Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, everyone who's advising the White House, tells them. That's what we want to avoid. So in the event that we saw some interest in coming to Michigan and we had to figure out how to keep people safe, just being outside is a huge step in the right direction. Just wearing masks is a huge step in the right direction. So my mission is not to keep, stifle political conversation. My mission is to keep people safe.
All right, we got to roll, Kim.
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate it.
Thanks.